Good morning. I'm Nick Bowen from RaeburnFarquharBowen, Landscape Architects. I'm up here in Stirling this morning, sorry I can't be with you. I'm here to talk about master planning for SuDS. To start with a few principles. Firstly, don't think of it as drainage, rather it's green space for water. SuDS is part of a green infrastructure network. It's multifunctional, it's providing habitat connectivity, convenient green routes, social, growing, play and amenity space. Secondly, SuDS requires space. This space needs to be in the right places for collection of water, conveyance, storage, infiltration, treatment and release. And unless this whole sequence is understood and considered during the initial master planning, you end up with gaps where there's insufficient space to provide above ground routing of water. This leads to going into pipes, which then leads to further problems downstream. Thirdly, the topography leads the way in the master plan. It will drive the street layout where SuDS is used. And unlike using a pipe drainage system, the connection between water flows and surface levels is very direct. So if you want to keep water on the surface, it's vital that topography works. Lastly, the exceedance routes need to be provided either in green space or streets. SuDS is also an opportunity for placemaking. Water is enticing and vibrant, and generally it's a signifier of quality in urban settings. Everyone seems to want to live near water. Also, it can provide further purpose and meaning to green space, and also justification for the provision of public spaces where development land is at a premium. It's cooling, irrigating, and can be a resource for reuse in the buildings or for irrigation of landscape areas. Master plan should embrace the water cycle, particularly areas which conventional drainage systems don't address, such as infiltration, aquifer recharge, evapotranspiration, providing evaporative cooling in urban areas, biomass accumulation of water, and healthy soils. What's the joy? And SuDS can provide that. It's an ephemeral natural element. It's proven mental health benefits from people being able to have sight of water in the same way having sight of green space improves healing outcomes. And we shouldn't be scared of it. We should design to reduce the risks of water and promote the benefits of water. Lastly, it's a creative opportunity. It's not a problem to resolve, but a chance we have to enrich, make more durable, and increase the connection of people to nature. So you can design a subbasin which functions as drainage infrastructure, or you can design somewhere as a beautiful blue-green place. Bertha Park is an example of using SuDS to lead placemaking for new housing. It's located on the edge of Perth in central Scotland. Here you can see Perth with the city centre outlined in yellow. Perth lies on the River Tay, and Bertha Park lies just immediately northwest of the town, or the city, where the Almond tributary runs in to meet the Tay. It's a site that extends to 330 hectares in total, of which 135 hectares is developed land in the plan, on which 3,000 homes will be built, together with secondary school, primary schools, shops and health services. The River Tay is the largest river by discharge in the UK. It's got a 2,000 square mile catchment which encompasses land up to over 1,100 metres in altitude. It's covered by special area conservation, which is home to the Atlantic salmon, otter, freshwater pearl mussel, European beaver, and several lamprey species, or as the Daily Express calls them, alien vampire fish. And do spiders crawl into your mouth at night? The quality of the Tay catchment is moderate at Perth, although the almond is of high quality. And this reduction in quality of the Tay has led to it becoming a diffuse pollution priority catchment designated by SEPA. And this scheme has been very successful in raising environmental compliance through the activity of a catchment coordinator. For instance, the dairy farm compliance in the catchment has raised from 16% to 50% through this scheme. Bertha Park drains to both rivers, so the aim to improve water quality from the developed land is really important. Perth itself has been subject to major flooding over the years, particularly in 1993, a major flood event at 6.48 metres in height caused major damage to Perth and led to a flood defence scheme, which is now in place. But flooding remains a sensitive issue in the locality. The existing habitats on Bertha Park, you can see here, there's a large block of woodland to the north, a lot of which is ancient semi-natural woodland, and then there's also a strip of ancient semi-natural woodland along the southern boundary which drops down to the River Almond. Beyond these peripheral woodland areas, there's a narrow ribbon of wetland where the Bertha Loch drains down to the Tay, but apart from this it's intensively farmed arable land, and there's a pylon line which crosses through the centre of the site. So the first step in looking at the master plan and how to sustainably drain the site was to look at natural flow analysis using sort of rolling ball to inform the layout of subcatchments across the site. The aim was to create small subcatchments so that the suds can be of small scale and dispersed through the development, which provides greater robustness. And also to use source control at catchment heads, and then to discharge to natural watercourses, using infiltration where the gravel and sands in the soil allowed. The volume design here was done by Harrop, and you can see the subcatchments were all divided up and the contribution from basins, ponds and swales was calculated based upon a half-metre surcharge depth. There wasn't any allowance for infiltration at this stage prior to full site investigation work, so this is very much a worst-case design. So the Green Infrastructure Master Plan creates a strong framework with habitat connections running across the site, spanning from the woodlands to the north down to the south, and also along the eastern and western boundaries, the eastern boundary providing screening of the A1 trunk road. Passing through the middle of the site is the Pylon Corridor and the Cross Tay Link Road, which will form a northern bypass to Perth. This was a given for our project. It wasn't anything that could be affected in our design, so one of the key aspects of the design was to try and knit across what could be potentially a very strong divisive feature through the centre of the site, but to use it instead as a very positive feature which bound the site together. You can see to the north of the site is the Bertha Loch, surrounded by ancient woodland, and to the south is the River Almond. The habitat networks we created were a blue and a green habitat network, obviously very intertwined, provide matrix habitats of wetland and woodland and meadow. and a dispersed linear web of green space. You can see here in dark green the woodland network, and in blue the principal water network created through the site. Phase 1 of the development encompassed the central park and the area immediately to west and east of it. The park has as its centrepiece SuDS Pond, which drains the surrounding housing area and also acts as an arrival focal point for the whole settlement, and has become really part of the identity of Bertha Park. This pond drains into a natural pond which doesn't have the same fluctuation in level from SuDS. And adjacent to these ponds are a play area, a park open space, orchard, allotments, and a nature park. All of this happening within the pylon corridor, so it's become a real way of animating what could be dead space. Obviously that brings constraints, so the height of planting, and particularly trees, has had to be controlled directly under the pylon lines. But the 30-metre wayleave either side of the pylon lines has created a good zone for green space, and the chance to really knit together the two halves of the development. So the Rainwater pond has a surcharge of 500 mil, providing the volume, and it's contained within a discharge weir, so that's a very simple weir with a orifice plate. The design of the pond is such that there's very gentle slopes and marginal shelves, so that we get a dense aquatic marginal vegetation grow around the pond, and this also provides a shelf to allow for safe self-recovery if you enter the water. The pond was designed with an impermeable liner, but when the pond was excavated there was a dense natural clay lens underneath the pond, which meant that puddled clay liner could be used and the plastic liner could be omitted here. And that also allowed a natural spring to emerge into the base of the pond to provide sweetening flow through the pond and to keep it topped up naturally during the summer. The SuDS ponds drains through the weir into the lower natural pond, which is also contained by a weir but doesn't have the same surcharge capacity. This means that there's got much greater opportunity for more natural, varied margins with less depth, and this is associated with the play area and with a nature trail around it, accessible to all. The construction of the pond was a relatively simple affair, but the key things were controlling the slope gradients and the site runoff during construction, and carefully setting the control of water level through the control structures at the weir. The design was adapted to a puddled clay liner, which greatly simplified construction and resulted in less resource being used. And native aquatic marginal planting was established from plugs at 5 to 7 plugs per square metre, with supplementary wet meadow seeding. Here you can see the deck which runs across the wildlife pond, which links the play area to the wildlife nature trail. The ponds filled naturally, and in the first season there was filamentous algae in the first flush, but that soon calmed down. So year on, in summer 2020, the aquatic planting had really thrived, formed a very dense margin, nicely varied, and the play area adjacent, you can see, was well established. And this summer the planting's gone from strength to strength. Interesting feature of the initial design and construction of the Suds Pond was that as the crescent of houses were built around it, the client wished to have a fence there during the establishment period so that the place felt cared for and also just to provide some safe separation. Now that the marginal shelf is densely vegetated, I was pleased to see that this fence has now been taken down, so there's a natural transition between grass verge through meadow into the aquatics. And here you can see the weir structure at the discharge into the natural wildlife pond. One of the key aspects of this design was satisfying the client that the relationship between the park and the play and the water was one that could work safely and that they'd be comfortable with. And I think the key here is the design of margins, gradients, and planting so that access is dissuaded into the water, but if it does happen, then it happens within sort of safe limits. This was always intended to design with no fences, and that was achieved. There's a good quote here from safety manager ICI looking at the design of a plant in Lincolnshire where there was a major disaster. And afterwards he said that they designed a strong cage in order to contain a lion, but perhaps a lamb might do. We should set ourselves the objectives of designing a lamb and not a lion. And does it work commercially? Well, this is the marketing material from Springfield Homes, and you can see that they're using the water to sell the homes. So thank you, and we can cover any questions in the next session.